real shitty, I would have like, there was no, I would have like Rochester radio guy on for like 5 minutes. And I remember one day, it must have been like 2003 or 2 or 3, and he was just like telling a story, and I was like, wasn't that story on Fark?
Yep.
Rim just told me that story. And then he told another Fark, and I'm like, this guy is just reading Fark.
The best part is Drew Curtis started planting stories to go after people like that at one point.
Good.
Like you put a fake story in, and in the comments, like it would be very obvious it's fake. But if you weren't paying attention to the comments, you might think it's real. I don't remember if he actually sued anyone or if he just like publicly shamed them.
I'm just saying, it would be real funny if a morning radio guy read a fake story as it was real. I'm sure it's happened.
Oh, what was they had a really good headline today around returning back to the office. That was something like, introverts mad that extroverts are going to resume control of all things in offices. I think we're good to go here. Streams live.
Isn't that just theonion.com?
Yeah, that was actually like a legit article about how office dynamics have changed, partly because people can't rely on social wiles as much to like make things happen. And like emails and other kinds of communication mattered a lot more. And power structures of big companies actually changed because of that.
I guess I believe it.
Yeah. So it'll be real interesting to see if things change again when people start coming back into the office.
I believe it.
All right. I'm just going to start. It's Thursday, March 11th, 2021. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight, we're talking about seasons of life. So, I did just go outside and run. So anyone watching the stream, I'm literally like wearing my running clothes. And I realized now that I'm looking at the stream that I'm wearing my running hat, which is like this Under Armour reflective running hat. And it is fucking like the sun reflecting the spotlight on my face.
Oh, so it's like my head.
But so earlier today, I was just in a Twitter conversation with some games people, and they were talking about like cookie clicker type games, and like, oh, I have this urge to play like a garbage game like that again. So I've
been playing this Loop Hero, and as another game I can talk about. I might talk about them a bit on Tuesday, but there's Loop Hero, and there's also a game on Steam I've been playing called Luck Be a Landlord.
Oh, you mentioned that multiple times, and I saw you playing it.
On a future Geek Nights. We'll talk about Luck
I think I got to poke at that, but we will talk about that on a future Geek Nights. But
anyway.
yeah, so I remembered a game that we've talked about, we reviewed, we used to reference a lot. A game called Candy Box. So yeah. I went and looked up like, oh, what's the current URL of Candy Box? Because I wanted to suggest to these people, hey, you want a clicker type game to play? This is like the clicker game. Like this is the ultimate clicker.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely newer than Progress Quest, but I feel like
it did the most with that genre, I think. Because there was a legit real game in there.
It's pretty much Cow Clicker, Cookie Clicker, Candy Box, and Progress Quest are like,
Yep. Candy Box 2 almost went too far and added like too much of a game.
Candy Box 2, you can just put that in it's not that exciting.
Yeah. But here's the problem. When I went to look at Candy Box, I discovered that Candy Box had been updated a little bit. Like there's a little better UX. It's still the same original game, but like things just work a little bit better.
That's nice.
So that's cool. So I poked at it a little bit, and I made my recommendation, like, hey, you should play Candy Box. But then I left it open in a tab and didn't think about it, and I shifted to that tab later, and I had a bunch of candies, and I clicked on everything I could click on, and I kind of kept playing Candy Box for like a day.
Did you beat Candy Box?
I got to the point where you fight the dragon, and then part of my brain said, Rim, fucking stop. And I didn't beat the dragon.
So Candy Box 1, at least, runs entirely locally in the browser and is written in JavaScript. So you can just open up your JavaScript console in the browser and just be like, change your number of candies directly.
Number of candies, number of lollipops.
Yeah, I just gave myself a zillion candies and beat the game in a few minutes.
You do still have to cast right spells in some places to get some things to happen. Like there is still a game there.
Basically, I just figured out like what, anytime I needed like to do, basically I eliminated all the waiting, right?
Yep.
I basically just, at any moment, I gave myself as much resources as I needed. and then just figured out what to click on and what order to get the game to go towards the end. And that's how I beat Candy.
I did when I first beat it. I beat it, quote, legit. But the way I did it is I just got the game up to a state, and then I just left it running in a tab at work for like a week. And I just came back to it. And then I just, I had enough candies to literally do everything in one go. And it was...
You could have just saved the week of computing time.
I just left the tab open. That computer was doing stuff anyway.
I'm just saying. It's a little silly. Anyway.
Here we go. Let's make Candy Box, but you have to mine cryptocurrencies to make candies.
Yeah, how about now?
So you got any news?
Do we have news? Yeah, so here's a news. I know it sounds like a K-pop news, but trust me, it's not. It's actually related to my job, somewhat news, at least, right? So I work for a music publisher, but regardless, a thing happened. There's a company called Kakao that is basically the secret master of K-pop. You can think of it that way. It's like there's usually you think of these big K-pop companies, they're like record labels and they have the big groups, but actually almost everyone who's not in the big groups and some who are big as well are basically all under like this one mega company that's like a distributor and it's like an everything in one company, Kakao that like they just like owns a large percentage of, the K-pop world, right? But regardless, the story is that they got into a fight with Spotify. Spotify recently launched in South Korea, right? Very recently, like this month, the previous month, like super recently. And because the biggest streaming services in Korea, the biggest one I think is actually Melon, which is owned by Kakao.
Oh.
Right? So there's some shenanigans going on there. But anyway, they got into a fight and the vast majority of K-pop was just removed from Spotify entirely. So a lot of people got mad. For example, Tableau, a famous K-pop dude, he was like, what's up with this bullshit, right? Two big companies get into a fight and, presumably, right, Spotify is fighting on behalf of the users, right? They want to keep the price of Spotify low because if they have to pay artists more money, they would have to raise the cost of Spotify or reduce their profits. Kakao is fighting on behalf of the artists, right? They want more money, for themselves and the people who actually make the music. So it's like, there's no right and wrong, really. It's like artists are underpaid. True. Also true, right? People aren't going to pay much more than what Spotify costs. If Spotify raises the price to like $50 a month, which is probably what it would take to pay artists fairly, people aren't going to pay that and artists will have nothing, right? So they fight and, Tableau was like, look, these two big companies fight and basically the people they're trying to help, the artists and the customers respectively, are both hurt. The customers are without the music they want to listen to, and the artists are now getting nothing for that duration because no one can listen to their music and they're going to go to YouTube or who knows where else to, pirate who knows, right? But they settled today for undisclosed terms, and so now the music is back. But I think it's just an interesting situation to think about, right? And because usually when these battles go on, we're coming in here like they're right and they're wrong and they're right and they're we're.
Well, it depends. It's one of those like the problem is honestly capitalism, and because we kind of talked about this in the but we kind of talked about this when we talked about cryptocurrencies last week around the like there are some commodities that have effectively become valueless to the average consumer, or if they have personal value, the incremental cost of getting one versus another starts to approach zero. For a lot of people, music is like that. They can listen to music generally, and they use some services to listen to music, but they don't think a lot about music otherwise. It's not like they'll say, oh, well, I really need to listen to this specific band, so I'm jumping ship on Spotify. I'm going to Quiblo, because Quiblo's got this one band.
A lot of K-pop people were like, hey, should we use YouTube Music or should we use iTunes now? Because Spotify was pretty much, the place, right? So
but with music, like every service...
like, okay, it's resolved. They came back, right?
Yep.
But if this had gone on longer, you absolutely would have seen K-pop fans cancel Spotify and go to YouTube Music or Apple Music.
Yep. Now, I think part of that is that K-pop fans they're not monolithic. Like, don't get me wrong, but they are definitely semi-unique in the music fandom world for a lot of reasons we've talked about before as a group. But also, I think for most people, if they move to one service or the other, not much changes because most services have most of the music that any given community will listen to, unless there's a specific genre that is under or overrepresented on one versus the other.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But all the mainstream music is going to be like the vast majority of it is going to be on all these services. It
Yeah.
won't come
Like I got a Sonos. I literally just type like meatloaf and but I don't even care where the meatloaf comes from. Do I hear it or not? And if
I care where the meatloaf comes from.
but if I ever type something big, mainstream, generic, old into one of my devices and no music comes up, I'm going to suddenly be very surprised and try to figure out why. But that basically almost never happens. The music I want to listen to that isn't on like Spotify is not on like really any service I'm going to subscribe to. Yeah.
Yeah. I just see there's a lot of parallels with this between, some other things we look at, like Apple versus Epic, right? Where it's like Epic is nominally fighting for the customer, right?
Yep.
And Apple is sort of fighting for the developer in a way.
Or in the old days with Amazon. Amazon fights for us, again, the jerk buying something.
Right, but Epic sort of is a developer, so it's it's a little hairy. But there's these battles going on where there's no who is which. It's not just like good guy and bad guy. It's like, is it two bad guys fighting? Is it two good guys fighting? Is two good bad guys fighting?
Yep.
Two gray areas battling each other. It's like,
well, it gets back to that thing of the incremental cost.
Two gray areas battle each other, and you don't really know who to root for, what outcome you want. But as long as they battle, everyone suffers.
Yep. But like the incremental cost of listening to a song one more time is basically zero. And the distribution of cost of that is also basically zero. So we kind of destroyed how we fund new works being created. And this problem is not going to get resolved in any field anytime soon. It's not zero sum, but it acts like zero sum for all intents and purposes from a lot of angles.
Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Yeah. So in some other news, if you are looking for work or in some trouble, like financially right now,
you're in New York.
Yeah, but there are things like this going on in a lot of other places. I'm going to link to one from New York. So way, way back when I desperately needed some money in high school to afford to go to college, I got a job working for the government, and for the time, it paid really, really, really well, and it wasn't the kind of job that someone like me would have thought I could get. That's how I got my first job ever, working for the U.S. Census. And I'll tell you, in the year 1999 and 2000, that job paid $10.50 an hour.
That was a lot in 1990. That's more than I made working at the dry cleaner, and way more than these summer camps. Working at summer camps, you would go. I worked at summer camps several times, and the way they worked is you would just get one paycheck at the end of the summer for the whole time.
Yep.
And it was not minimum. It was way less than minimum wage. Right? And part of it was that, the compensation also included like all this lodging and food you were getting and things like that, right? So it's a little bit fair, a little bit.
Yep.
Because you don't have to pay rent while you're working at a summer camp, for example, right? But it's like you would work 8 weeks in a row, not 24/7, basically, with a few days off here and there. And then at the end, they'd give you like $3K.
Yep. It's kind of similar to how working at an amusement park often works for people. Like people are working like Cedar Point.
$10 an hour is real good in 1990, whatever, for a high school kid.
Oh my God. I got my first paycheck and it was like 400 something bucks. And I was like, I didn't know what to do with that much money.
Right. On the one hand, it's still criminally low. Right. The minimum wage should have been more than that even then.
Yep. Like the fight for 15 right now is obsolete.
Yes, but it was still better than average at the time in the circumstance.
So right now, there are a lot of jobs. These are temporary jobs. You're not going to make a career out of this, at least not working for the same place. Managing all the infrastructure, which is more substantial than you might realize, around getting vaccines out to people. Like the effort of getting vaccines out to Americans is one of the larger logistical projects that has ever happened in America. Like this is on the level with big Great Depression era things that we did, like the CCC.
even though it's ongoing, you think, oh, they've already got it's like, no, we've only gotten some of the way there. We're still giving them to only like people who are like getting in New York just said, okay, you can make an appointment if you're 60 or over. It's like when they open it up to like 40 plus 30, just any old adult, there's going to be so many people.
Yep. And there are so many tasks that need to be done to make these things work. Like,
yeah, not just jabbing people. There's a lot more jobs.
Yep. Like, think about a PAX. How many enforcers at a PAX does it take to just like keep lines together? Now, imagine keeping lines together that are an order of magnitude bigger, who are not PAX attendees, but regular ass people.
And there's the line.
And there's a pandemic, so you still got to keep them like 6 feet apart from each other the whole time.
There's all kinds of problems going on, right?
Yeah.
And that's just one of the things you could be doing.
So there are things like this all over, but I'll link to one of these as an example. In New York City right now, there's a giant vaccine center at the Javits, which is our terrible convention center. It's a terrible convention center. Like,
I'm sure it's fine for vaccine distribution.
It is, but it's not good for like nerd stuff.
It's a big empty room. It'll get the job done.
It is perfect.
You're not doing it.
It is perfect for this. They are desperate for people to help them administer the vaccines. They are paying $27 an hour, and you can get shit tons of overtime if you're willing to just work like 12-hour shifts. Like, they'll pay you time and a half on top of that. And pretty much
$27 an hour is, I'd say, like a fair minimum wage almost.
I'd say $27 an hour would be a good starting point for the new minimum wage in America.
Yeah, maybe it's close.
Yeah.
Right?
15's not enough. 27.
I'd like to. I should do the math. Like, I guess, like, if you made $6 an hour in the 50s, or let me get my inflation calculator. Hold on.
My God. The last time I did something like that, like, because the metric I used the last time I looked at this was something like, what is the wage it took for one person to support a family of 4 and buy a house in the 50s?
All right. So actually, I think I think 27 might only be halfway there, because I hear old people say, oh, when I was a kid in the 50s, I only got like $5 an hour. Right.
It's like, and somehow you bought a house and like married someone and had kids and sent both of them to college.
$5 an hour.
Or $5 an hour.
Adjusted for inflation with usinflationcalculator.com in 2021 would be $49 an hour. So
why do you think I'm a communist?
27 is halfway there. Right.
So the Javits, like, they need people right now. Like, if you call them up with your resume, like, there's a good chance you can get these jobs. They need customer service people, vaccinator support. They do need people who have technician training, like they need pharmacists and licensed professionals, but they also need people just to do shit like manage lines, fill out paperwork. One of these jobs is data entry, just sitting at a desk typing data in from pieces of paper.
Yeah, someone comes up, you're like, so-and-so got their first vaccine on this date. You type it in, right? Who are they? What's their name? Where do they live? You know, whatever.
And if you think you're not qualified for this kind of stuff, that job I got for the U.S. Census, I'd never been trained in anything. I went to high school.
If you know
in America
to listen to a fucking podcast, you know how to do most of those jobs.
My first real jobs were data entry and clerical work, like payroll stuff. I sat there for 4 hours a day at one point, looking at pieces of paper and typing numbers on those pieces of paper into a system.
I had a lot of jobs doing filing where there would be a stack of paper and there would be a big shelves full of filing folders, and you would literally take a piece of paper, look at the last name, find the folder, and put the piece of paper in the folder.
I did that at the end of the census.
You just do that over and over again, and like I got paid money for that.
Yep. I did that at RIT, but they didn't pay me $27 an hour to do it.
If you're listening to this, you can do that. I'm sure you can.
Yep.
If someone paid $27 an hour to do that, I might rather do that than what I do now.
I definitely, I mean, like, it's interesting where on one hand, I like a really challenging job, but on the other hand, I do sometimes think back to when I had jobs that were mindless and how I could literally 100% compartmentalize them away. And I miss it sometimes, but then I also remember the reality of a job like that and how boring and soul-crushing it was. Really, we just need a post-scarcity society and communism, but we'll get there. Anyway, in some news that is political news, but it is a big deal, and there's a reason I want to talk about this. The American Rescue Plan, like that giant COVID relief bill, actually was signed into law today. And that's actually
without the aforementioned minimum wage increase, but with most of the other stuff.
We can talk about that in a second, because actually removing the minimum wage from this bill was probably a good idea, because otherwise the bill would not have passed today. Even if the minimum wage happened, it would have taken like possibly months more to pass the bill for reasons like that's beyond the scope of the show. But as an aside, because you mentioned it, not all, but most of the senators who voted no on the minimum wage issued statements saying they only oppose including it in this bill. They are sponsoring the next separate bill that is the minimum wage bill.
All right, well, we'll see about that.
Yeah, we'll see. But the thing about this bill that's important is that it passed for real. Like, this is a law.
This is now the law of the land in the United States.
Yep.
Yes.
And if you haven't actually looked at what it does, it's not just this like that stimulus check.
Well, it's enormous. I'm not sure if there's anyone who knows everything it does.
No, the only person who knows
one person.
There is one person who knows everything, because part of the reason why it took so long to pass this bill is, you know what the Republicans did, like right at the end?
They made him read it because the procedural nonsense.
Yep, they voted to force a reading of the bill. What that means is every single word in this bill, which is like, 680 pages, had to be read aloud on the Senate floor. The Republicans forced that to happen, and then they all left. And this dude had to sit there.
You should have changed, it's like you get what that's the procedure that's in the rules. You should, if you don't like it, you should change those procedural rules to be like, all right, if there's a reading, every senator must sit there for the entire reading.
Yep.
Common sense rule. If you think that having readings is like it should be part of the rules in the first place, then make everyone sit there.
Yep. Well, like the filibuster. Fuck this idea that you can filibuster something by saying, I'm going to filibuster it. If you want to filibuster something, you better fucking stand there and piss your pants.
Well, you shouldn't have that either. You should be forced to vote at some point.
Yep. But, anyway, we make fun of the monarchy because that came up lately, but we have the filibuster and the Senate, so we got our own problems over here. But anyway, this bill is honestly, like, the best way to describe it is transformative. This bill does a ton of really progressive stuff, the benefits of which we're going to see for like decades and decades and decades to come. There's huge tax credits for people who have kids. There's lots of housing assistance. It's like this bill is a big deal. And the reason I bring this up is
not like what you're used to, where it's like, oh, we're here to save the day by giving money to companies.
Yep,
right?
like the previous COVID relief bills that the Republicans put through that didn't actually do much for us.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I don't want to get
feeling any relief.
Yep, but this bill will this is one of the biggest pieces of legislation America has ever passed in the modern era.
Dollar-wise.
Yep. And also in terms of what it changes, it's on par with the ACA, Obamacare. But the reason I bring this up as news is that the Democrats, the not evil party, I'm not necessarily saying the good party, just the not evil party, they are doing a very different strategy with this bill compared to what happened the last time they passed a big bill like this. Because in America, they passed the ACA, what is Obamacare, which radically transformed America and got healthcare to a lot more people. And honestly, just made America a better place. It was a really good bill. And what it did was actually very popular in America among all Americans. Even Republicans were very happy with what the bill did. The problem was they hated the bill. That disconnect is a big part of why American politics got so broken and extreme so quickly. The Democrats basically lost the House and lost a lot of representation and lost on the issue of this bill being passed, despite this bill being very popular. Partly because what they had assumed was that if they passed a bill that radically reformed healthcare for the better, they would get credit for the fact that they had radically reformed healthcare for the better and would be able to build on that foundation. But the assumption that because you did a good thing, the people who benefit from it will understand what you did is false. Similar to the idea that if I make some good software, if I design a really good game, of course people will play it. It's a really good game. Why wouldn't they play it? The reality is, if you don't also market and tell people about the thing, people will never find out about the thing.
people don't know, and people are, ignorant. They're not paying attention. They're got other things going on. They've been lied to by someone else who's in their ear, right?
Yep.
There are so many reasons besides just being, some, you obviously are thinking of, the stereotypical Republican who lives in the hills listening to some right-wing radio people, right? Or watching the faux news. But there's a lot of other people who, don't, for a wide variety of reasons, you just will not learn the wrong thing because you need to control, right? It's like, is it propaganda? Yes. Is that this propaganda on the opposite also, right?
Well, you know what? There's a real succinct way to put it. If you don't tell your own story, someone else is going to tell your story for you.
Right. And it's like the problem with propaganda is when the propaganda isn't true.
Yep.
If the propaganda is all true, what's the problem?
Yep.
Right?
Hey, everyone, get a vaccine. They work.
And not putting out true propaganda, you're just leaving a huge vacuum for false propaganda to exist. You can't stop anyone else from doing it in a society with free speech.
Exactly.
Right? So you need to put the truth propaganda out there, right? And, propaganda is a bad word, but if it's true, why is that bad?
And that's what's different here. This is something I want you to internalize if you're thinking about American politics. The Democratic Party, and I'm not saying this is an unapt application to them, has never been super good about getting its message out there for a lot of reasons. Yes. And the big difference between right now and the last time they passed a big bill is they've learned from their mistakes. Like they have openly talked about at length in public. Yep. They've talked about why did we lose the messaging battle on Obamacare, one of the most popular bills that ever passed. And they took those lessons to heart, and they're spending a lot of time. They're going to advertise the fact that this bill passed. One of the things, they are really focused on making it clear that people understand that this bill that is going to help a lot of people passed because of the Democrats and that no Republicans voted for it. And you can see it starting to work. Multiple Republican senators have praised this bill already and said, oh yeah, this is going to help my constituents. And the Democrats immediately started running ads and pushing the message out, making it clear that
so-and-so voted against it.
Yeah, you voted against this bill, fucko. You don't get credit for this. You actively opposed us doing this. This is a profound shift in how American politics has gone for the last several decades. I don't know if this will work, but I want you to notice that. Pay attention to how this messaging is different. Democrats ain't perfect, but they are trying a different strategy. If you're losing against Hades over and over again in Hades, and you never change your strategy, that's on you. If you're trying to make the sword and Artemis work against Hades, that's real fucking hard. Maybe try the shield.
Angle, right. Also, the propaganda angle again, right? It's we, at least hopefully anyone listening to this, right, you can recognize that it's propaganda. If you can think about it in the meta, then hasn't it lost its power to just mindlessly brainwash you?
Yep. Right? Like we talk about with ads. I know it's an ad. I'm immediately suspicious of it.
Right. So when you see the messaging coming, whether it's from whoever it is, the good people or the bad people or some other third party or who knows, right? Consider all of it in the meta circumstance, the way we're discussing the strategy in the meta circumstance to keep your head in the correct place.
Whenever a message is sent to you or given to you or you see propaganda, think specifically, who is putting this message in front of me? What are they trying to convey? And what motive might they have? Those are the three things to ask yourself. Because if you know the who, you know the motive, and you know the what, you can evaluate this message and understand what's going on. You can also protect yourself from bad propaganda and dangerous lies.
Yep.
And you can also help spread the messages that might allow us to achieve better goals. So if the who is Democrats, the goal is get people to understand that this bill helped them. And the motivation beyond that is so that we can then pass more bills that are like this. That's a message to share, even though we didn't get everything we wanted. We still need the $15 minimum wage. That's a baby step. We still need to fight for that. But don't tank the messaging of we did do something because we didn't do one of the 100 things we could do.
All right, so one of the 100 things we could have done that we didn't do was cancel the rent anywhere, pretty much, right? We delayed evictions in some places, I guess, depending on your state, the different lots of technicalities.
Yep. Mostly we just kicked that can down the road of misery, and it's going to be a bad situation still.
Right. So the bad situation is an example. I want to highlight this example of the bad situation coming because it hits close to home, right? Most of the cases in which people have said, oh no, this pandemic is going to cause me to go out of business, right? Have, on the one hand, obviously sympathetic, someone losing their business is not good. But if you think about it on the whole, it's like, okay, you've basically just decided that instead of paying people's rent and letting them off the hook, you're just going to have businesses go out of business. And then when the pandemic's over, people can start new businesses, right, from nothing. And, if your local pizza place goes away, and then it's like, okay, well, no one's buying pizza right now, but in 2 years from now, start a new pizza place, and now we have pizza again, right? It's not like, in the grand picture, while it sucks for the previous pizza owner, in the grand picture, it's not, like the worst.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course, there's the asterisk of capitalism has made this all much worse than it needed to be.
Obvious, yes. But here's an example where no, right? This is why we still needed to cancel the rent, and why just saying, oh, go out of business and come back later is not a good enough answer. So there is a place in New York in Chinatown called the Jing Fong dim sum, right? And now there's plenty of dim sums in New York City. If you don't know dim sum, it's like the greatest Chinese food experience you can have, right?
Yep. If you've never heard of it, just find a place that has it, go there on like a Sunday morning and have a grand old time.
That's right. So there's some in Flushing. There's others in Chinatown. There's plenty. We're not going to be without dim sum in New York City probably ever, right? We've been without it for a while, but we're going to be going back into it as soon as...
God damn it. My mouth, I'm already hungry. And I have not had dim sum since February. Late January. I'm salivating for dim sum specifically.
Late January 2020.
Yeah, late January 2020. I had some dim sum.
I probably hadn't had it since 2019.
God damn it.
But Jing Fong, was it the best dim sum? I don't think so, but it was very good, definitely good enough. And I went there many times. There are obviously people who went there way more than me. I've gone there with like coworkers. I've gone on dates there. I've gone with friends there. I've gone there with I have a lot of memories going to there, even though it's maybe been only double-digit number of visits in my life, right? And the thing about that place is that it was just this enormous ballroom. Like in New York City, you do not see a room this big often.
Yep.
Right? It's like you would go there, you would take an escalator up to the second floor, and then they would seat you at these enormous circular tables. You'd usually be sitting with strangers unless you had a lot of friends with you.
Yep.
And it just, the room was just freaking huge. And it's like people going around bringing food everywhere. And then it'd also be like someone sitting at a desk, just like in the middle of the ballroom. And they're like taking reservations because people having birthday parties there, office functions there, award ceremonies, like any kind of event you could book. You only needed a portion of the room. You didn't even need the whole room.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'd wall off a part of the room to have an event, right? Because it's like you don't need that much space. It was so enormous. And it was just like such a unique experience eating at this place. And obviously I wouldn't be talking about it if they weren't shutting it down. Right? They had no choice financially, because of the situation and not canceling rent and a jerk landlord. They have no choice. It's like they're going down. Goodbye. It's closed. You can never go there again. You'll have to go get your dim sum somewhere else. And it's like, oh, just come back later. It's like, a place like this can't come back later, right? It's like, yeah, you can open up a new dim sum restaurant in New York, with the same chefs, I guess, and make the same food, but you can't get that ballroom back. Like, it's going to be carved up into apartments or who knows what the heck they're going to do with it, right? Turn it into something. But you're not going to find another space to get that large a square footage to have that same experience, right? And the amount of money it would cost to renovate it and to get all those tables and the way the room was decorated, right? It'd probably cost probably six figures just to renovate. If you got a room,
six figures,
to look like that.
Six?
Probably.
Nah, I think seven.
We're talking cheap decorations.
I'm
right?
still talking 7. I've learned
Those aren't actual gold dragons on the wall. It's just like stuff painted with gold paint. But the point is, it'd be really hard. It's basically impossible unless a rich person bails them out, right? Because capitalism, right?
Yep.
That's it. There's no hope whatsoever. No amount of crowdfunding would be enough. They could
And
not
this-
crowdfund enough to rescue this. It would be so expensive.
This kind of story is going to play out all over America. Like you know, the previous topic about messaging and propaganda. Do not let the public consciousness forget all the things that we've lost that we don't realize we lost yet, that we're going to discover that we've lost as we enter a post-COVID society.
Right. We're not talking about replaceable things that were lost, like just local pizza joint went away and a new one came in. We're talking about like the unreplaceable experience here. And it's just one place, but it's like there will be many such places like this.
Like it's a tiny thing, but like Burger Garage, I don't think a place like that could come back to Queens, like this part of Queens.
I mean, we lost Malu, and that was way pre-COVID, and no ice cream has been, it's like we got some good ice creams now, like
nothing close to Malu.
Yeah, it's like,
that awesome nerdy dude who ran that shop. I miss that dude. I still remember we talked about him the other day because Emily and I were actually thinking about what's going to be out there like post-COVID, like what.
Yeah, we have Ample Hills, which is really good ice cream and has lots of interesting flavors, but it's not Malu.
Yeah.
It's still A+ tier. It's like, okay, we had that S tier ice cream and now we have a different A+/S tier ice cream, but it's not that S tier ice cream, right?
As we enter a post-COVID society and we start to try to live our quote normal lives again and everything, we have to make it very clear societally what we lost. And it has to be abundantly clear. Like we need to talk about and make sure that message gets spread that we didn't have to lose those things. Most of what we've lost to COVID on this scale, I'm not talking about humans who died, though many of those were also preventable. A good chunk of the things we lost to COVID did not need to be lost. But in America, one political party forced us to lose them, and the other political party didn't do enough to stop them. Like, don't let the government get away with just letting us lose all these things. Like, remember that we could have saved a lot of them. But anyway, things of the day on a lighter note. So a while ago, I did The Legend of Beavis. And if you recall, The Legend of Beavis reeked of effort. It was way higher quality than it had any right to be or even needed to be. Like, it was just so tightly done. This is another one of those things. It's from January of 2021. It's relatively recent. It's called Life as a Bokoblin, a Zelda nature documentary. This shit is 20 minutes long. It is
oh my God.
It is a full BBC-style documentary on the lives of Bokoblins. The production values on this are off the charts. I mean, we started watching it last night. We watched a few minutes. We're like, this is actually pretty good. We watched the whole goddamn thing. This is a triumph. This is just, you could put this on the BBC and it would fit in right next to a legit real nature documentary. That is how well they put this together.
I guess they had a lot of time on their hands when,
they made a 4-hour long, the making of video. It's an hour and a half long, but it is how we made this. This is a full-on production. This is crazy.
All right. So we know that sports analytics has become a big deal over time, and there are various sources of data that are more or less accessible to the general public. But most of the analytics people in sports are trying to figure out, things in relation to betting or scouting, right? It's like what players are better than others, right? Who's improving? Who should you draft higher? These sorts of player-specific questions. Who's better than who, right? What team should I bet on tonight? Who's more likely to win in this matchup? All these sorts of things are the questions people are trying to answer. And they're not using the people whose job it is to do analytics aren't using the data necessarily to just answer fun, interesting questions, right? That matter to just people who are just generally interested. Occasionally journalists will do this, but usually they're relying on the analytics people, right? More, sometimes at least. I know some journalists are like putting in big efforts to like learn the analytic stuff themselves and to like up their own skills to like, make themselves better at their job, which is
I'm
kinda
actually
awesome,
I'm
right?
getting more into that like deeper type of statistical analysis myself at work.
But anyway, some random person on Reddit decided to take the data from basically the entire decade of the NHL, and they counted all the penalties, all 105,639 penalties for all the teams, and they arranged them to answer such question as which penalty is called the most, which team gets called for each penalty the most,
Looking at you, Tampa fucking Bay.
which player gets called for which penalties the most.
Looking at you, Mikko Koivu.
Which players draw penalties the most, the least, etc. Which teams get penalized more often in total, right? Pretty much anything you can get that's interesting out of just knowing just a straight list of which penalties were called, what penalty was it against which player on which team, and add that all up. And it's all presented here just in a Reddit post for everybody to read with 2.8 thousand upvotes on it, as you would expect. And the interests, a lot of it is just exactly what you'd expect. Like, yeah, the dirty player has the most unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, common sense, but also, things we know, like, referees like to just sort of even up the penalties instead of just calling whoever deserves to be penalized, to sort of manage the game a bit. And this, you'll see the teams that are penalized the most often also draw penalties the most, right? Refs like to even it out there, right? These sort
You
of
also
things.
see the penalties that don't get called. Spearing's the one that I was going to bring up.
Spearing does not get called nearly enough, right? But also these penalties that get called like once in a decade, right? Coach on the ice, headbutting, right? And you can say, hey, that penalty was called once. There must have been a special incident. And indeed there was. And then you can YouTube and find that special incident and learn what the story was.
Hi, Miles Wood, possibly the only person ever to get called for butt ending in like the modern era.
Right. And slew footing, right? Which gets called way not enough. But yeah, go ahead and take a look at this. It is quite fascinating, even if you don't care about ice hockey.
Oh, interesting. So it's funny, just looking at data like this, the things that stood out to me are one, the Rangers actually are the leaders in boarding for some reason. Like they board people more.
I mean, you're adding up a whole decade, which is like, right.
Yeah. In the meta moment, still stuck at home. Like, I don't know what to say. We're reading the Tale of Genji again, though. It's happening.
Yep. I read some more last night. Some stuff happened. Someone died. Which is, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of characters and it's a huge book, so that's not a spoiler.
Yep, more characters will die.
The Tale of Genji is the first novel ever written by human beings ever. How could you not read that? It's like, have you seen the first movie? Have you watched the first animation ever? I hope you have, right? It's pretty short. It's like, if there's a first of, have you played the first video game? Right? Probably, right? Space War, what? Right? Something like that.
Yeah, Space War Pong, depending on,
Yeah, depending on your definition or whatever. But it's like, if there's a first of something, I feel like, okay, I'll read. If I'm going to live this life as a human being, I will read the first book. I will do that. And I'm doing it now.
And it's getting warm. I can do the thing that I thought I would do where, since I'm still stuck and I can't get the vaccine for a while, I might just go like bike out to a park and sit out in the middle of nowhere and read for a little bit under the sun.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because it was like 70 degrees today in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the high was 69. Nice.
It was a little bit cold today, but still I opened the window.
I went out and ran shorts and a t-shirt.
Okay.
I think this weekend I'm going to do a long bike ride.
We'll see.
It'll be like 50,
It's going to
though.
get colder. It's getting colder. Yeah. This is a temporary deal.
So, way back in the year of our Lord 2012, we did an episode of GeekNights called Seasons, but in that case, we reviewed a board game called Seasons. We did another show, which was more fascinating. Oh, when did we do this one? We did this one in, it's important, the month, June of 2007, called Gaming Season. And the episode description is, tonight on Geek Nights, we talk about why we're not playing any video games. I actually went back. Before the show, we were looking at what was going on in 2007. That was basically like the literal rock bottom of PC gaming. Like that was before, like Team Fortress 2 came out a couple months after we did this episode. So this was the era where like, I don't think either one of us was running Windows. Like we both had Linux on the desktop. I bought that Mac. Like we were not playing video games. Like we were between consoles and like the Wii had come out yet. So we were like past a generation of consoles. New generations hadn't come out. We were never on board with like the PlayStation 2, Xbox era. So we were playing
Xbox 360, but that was later than that.
I also had an Xbox 360. I played Street Fighter on it, and then eventually I sold it to a coworker.
I played a few things on it.
I think it did
anyway.
Shadow Complex, or was that on the GameCube?
Yeah, that was Shadow Complex.
That was Shadow Complex.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, but it was interesting because looking at that old episode, I was thinking about seasons and seasonality of our lives, because something we've complained about a lot as we left school was that in our lives up until college and like right at the end of college, the seasons radically changed our life. Like fall, go back to school. Summer vacation. Like there was a like almost
two, but but winter and I guess winter was always a holiday season, right? But that's still true. But basically, fall through spring, it was pretty much either school or not school, right? It wasn't like, that much of a deal to go from like, winter to spring.
Yeah, well, I guess winter to spring for me was always like, okay, it's starting to get warmer out, but more importantly, summer's coming and school will end. Like all of spring, I would just be thinking, here comes summer vacation.
Sure.
But
the point is, once you have a job, right, in the adult world, it's like, doesn't matter what freaking season it is, your daily life routine doesn't change, right?
Yep.
You might have things on, your schedule throughout the year based on your life, right? Like we have PAX on the schedule, or we did, you might have some holiday stuff on the schedule, depending on which holidays you observe. But for the most part, like, it doesn't matter if it's 90 degrees summer or,
well, like today, it was 70 degrees all day and beautiful. Guess what I was doing? Sitting at my desk working all day.
Yeah, when it was freezing cold 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, sitting at my desk working all day.
Yep. But I was thinking about that in the context of, like, my life still actually does have a lot of seasonality. I'm going to discard the COVID era because this was it was COVID season. But the rest of my life, like, and I'm curious. I'll never forget that one time I saw a ghost.
One time I saw a virus.
But I was thinking about it, and I realized that there is a lot of seasonality to my life still as an adult, and it's actually gotten more defined as I've gotten older, but it's not tied to the weather seasons anymore, but it's still there. There is still a seasonality.
The weather seasons have gotten all fucked the fuck up.
They have. Like, and this is not, like, we talked about this on GeekNights, officially, like, in terms of, like, how the seasons work, New York City is subtropical. We live in a subtropical zone. This is not a temperate zone. We don't have 4 seasons like you think. Because, especially American listeners and a lot of European listeners, spring, summer, winter, fall. You realize a lot of places on Earth don't have those 4 seasons. Like, weather patterns are different.
They got rainy season and not rainy season.
Yep. Or like Singapore has the wet, like the hot rainy season and the windy rain. Like, there's 2 different kinds of rainy season that happen. And New York is not like that. We don't have 4 seasons. It's like spring is a weird, almost vestigial season in New York now. There's like a rainy summer and a non-rainy summer are like our seasons now. But I was just thinking about this a lot, and I've realized that my life seasonality is actually pretty well defined, but it's defined by all these different clocks and not the weather anymore. But the only seasonal weather clock that I still have, and I realized this happened to me by accident. When I was a kid, my parents would always talk about spring cleaning. Like, oh, it's spring. We're going to do spring cleaning. And I just ignored that. But, like, my parents would be all busy, and they would, like, do all these things every year. Like, as soon as they got warm enough to open the windows.
Came from. We're going to do some Google.
You going to look that up?
Yeah.
Because my impression of it was always...
My feeling is that people do spring cleaning because of the phrase spring, like because you know the phrase, you feel like that's the time that you should do some cleaning. And I'm going to read the history on Wikipedia, which any listener could just do themselves and stop listening right now.
Yep. Some researchers trace the origin to the Iranian Nowruz, the Persian New Year, which falls on the first day of spring. Another possibility relates to Passover.
Yeah, because you got to clean all the bread out.
Yep. Because I grew up in Michigan. Spring cleaning was definitely a thing. Like all the parents would do it, but I think part of it was so cold in the winter because we're in Michigan. Like winter's real cold. As soon as it was warm enough to be in the garage with the garage door open and open the windows and like go outside. There's a lot of cleaning that we didn't do during the winter because it was cold. Like we didn't take rugs outside and beat them. The rugs just stayed dusty all winter. And in the spring, you take them outside.
It does say here that before they had a vacuum cleaner, March was the best time for dusting because you could open the windows, like you just said, but not warm enough for insects to come in, and the high wind would help.
Yep.
And also, it was warm enough you wouldn't have to run your coal furnace and fill your house with soot.
Right?
So
I wonder if it came out of that era and persisted as a cultural tradition as many of those factors were no longer present.
Yeah, I've never followed the spring cleaning. Not that I'm not saying there are definitely times of the, where I will say, okay, it's time, and I'll do an extra cleaning, right? Like I'll super clean stuff. I'll clean the windows.
But those aren't tied to spring. That's just like, it's time to bleach the bathroom.
Right. I just do it like when it's time, I'll do this big clean, but it's not necessarily spring.
Yeah.
I've done it. I'm sure I've done it. It's spring at least once, but like, other times I will, do different cleans.
So when I think back, the things that my parents would like do big cleans about were mostly things that required the garage door to be open, like cleaning out the garage. The garage basically didn't get touched all winter. No one went in there. It was cold. As soon as it's spring and you can be in the garage comfortably, we would like clean the garage out and deal with all the mess we made all winter and that kind of thing. And in my adult life now, living in New York, I think there is a big difference between people who live in houses and people who live in apartments in this regard too, because the seasons don't change what we can do to our apartments as much as they change what we can do to our houses.
That's true. That's true.
But I have taken up a lot of sports.
You have a house, right? If you have a house and suddenly it's warm out, you can do like a gardening.
Yep.
Like there's all these things you can do without. You can fill your pool if you got a pool.
Yep. There's like house chores that appear that were not. They're like unlocked.
There's chores, but there's also like things that you could just, not tasks even, but just like things you can do that you couldn't do when it was cold because if you got an apartment, it's like the things that you can do pretty much the same.
There's one thing. I can go out on my balcony in the spring and summer, but I can't really do that in the winter.
Right, but it's like you can, and there's other things that you can do just sort of replace each other, right? So it's like in the summer you can go to the beach, and in the not summer you can go to the hockey game. It's like okay, but other stuff is just like it doesn't matter. It's just you can do X and it's cold. You can do X and it's warm, but it's the same X.
Yep. But one thing, the main seasonality I find in my life is more around what is the set of activities that consume my not like day-to-day life, but like week-to-week life. But hockey season isn't like just winter because hockey season kind of gets long and weird, and COVID also made it weird. So, like, there's a season of I go to a hockey game semi-regularly, and I put hockey on like kind of regularly when I'm around the house. Like, there's hockey season and non-hockey season, and the fact that hockey is there sort of informs how my life goes. Like, when hockey is a thing, many nights we'll cook dinner and have the hockey game on kind of while we eat dinner. Maybe I'll watch the whole game. Maybe I'll go play Overwatch. But if I'm playing Overwatch, the hockey game's like on the other monitor. I'm kind of paying attention to it. And I notice its lack when it's not hockey season.
Mm-hmm. There's biking season and there's not biking season.
Yep.
For some people, that season doesn't end. They just bike no matter what.
I got a coworker who, like, pre-COVID, like, he bikes to work from further away than you would expect is reasonable, no matter what. Pouring rain, bikes to work.
I think I determined that like 12 miles would be like my absolute limit for a commute, right? Daily. but I can't do weather that's like too cold or any precipitation whatsoever.
Yep.
I've been caught in the rain a couple times, but if I see that it's raining, I'm not going on purpose, right?
And my old job, I used to, because it kind of like I could show up to the office looking like a dead rat, it'd be fine. But I can't really get away with that with my current job.
I was always caught in the rain on the way home. I was never caught on the way to work.
I biked home once from work, and I got caught in like I thought I could beat the rain home. The rain that came down on me on the Williamsburg Bridge was like legendarily strong.
I've been hit, I think, twice by the legendarily strong rain on the way home.
Like I stopped biking because I couldn't see far enough ahead of myself and just stood there.
In the winter, it's like in the summer, I'm just checking for rain, right? It's still biking season. In the winter, it's like it will never be right a bike to work day in the winter, right? Even no matter even if it doesn't snow, it's too cold.
Yep, exactly. So the seasons in our lives right now are things like that. Like, are there outdoor activities I can or can't do? Like, I ski in the winter. I can't ski any other time. I structure my life around skiing during ski season because it's something I can only do during this very limited window. Mm-hmm. I don't structure my life as much around biking because I have a much longer bike season. It's like mid-spring to late fall. I can bike almost as much as I want.
Yeah, I don't structure around the biking. The biking would just like fill in gaps.
Yeah,
right?
like, oh, well, I got nothing going on this weekend.
I guess we're going biking or beaching.
Yep. But like in the winter, it's like, okay, there are only so many weekends I can ski. I'm going to ski every single weekend I can unless something gets in the way. And I like structure things around it. Like multiple Pack South. So I would go to Pack South and then remember I would like fly home kind of early Sunday to get to a ski trip. Mm-hmm. But living in an apartment added an extra weird seasonality to that I never had to deal with because as a kid we lived in a house and in Beacon we had a house. I don't have a lot of room for stuff, so I will store things. Some things I have to store in a way that I can get to them easily. Like during biking season, all my bike shit has to be like readily available. It can't be like buried under the bed behind suitcases.
Yeah, it's like it'll take you, if you decide to bike, and you're going to have to either the night before or the morning of, like, dig a whole bunch of shit out. It's like a huge pain in the butt. It's like you need and that'll probably, that might even, the difficulty of that will probably prevent you from biking. Like you will bike less or whatever your hobby is, right? If the stuff you have to do the thing is like not out. Like imagine if I had to tear down and put away all the podcast shit and then set it all up again. I would podcast a lot less.
Yeah. Why do you think we're doing a lot less video during COVID? We have to put a lot of shit together to do a video, like way more.
If your shit is just set up and ready to go all the time, you will do the thing, whatever it is, more. So if there is a thing you do seasonally, such as biking or skiing, whatever that stuff is, when the season starts, set up the stuff and find a way to have it out and ready and available. And then when the season ends, put it into the deep sleep, right? So it's out of the way and you make room for some other stuff. And that way you will do the seasonal thing more, right, than you otherwise would have, right? And it's just, basics like, hey, your bathing suits are in a thing under the bed. Now they're in with the rest of the shorts and where the pants, and the jeans are under the bed, right? Simple stuff like that.
So like right now, like ski season basically is over now. Like it's like it's probably like 50 or 60 degrees up at like even the nearest mountain I could get to. So
it's over.
So ski season done.
At least here it is. You can go to the other half of the world, the bottom half.
Yeah, and if it wasn't COVID,
the top half, depending on your point of view.
I might, can't now, but yeah, basically when ski season ends, now that I live in an apartment, I really took for granted the fact that my family had a basement and a garage for basically my entire life. So if we wanted to go skiing, I went into the basement, got my skis, and they stayed in the same place year round. There's no reason to move them. Now, like the ski season ends, I have to Tetris all this ski shit that barely fits into my apartment, like into the deepest corners of the apartment as far and deep as possible, because I literally can't use them again until next year. So I can then bring out from those deepest crevices all the things I'm going to use in the summer. And I do this like there's 3 points in the year where I have to like shift all this crap around in the apartment.
You could get a mini storage thing, but I've never done that because that's
admitting defeat.
It would be great to have because the stuff just wouldn't be in my apartment at all. So my apartment would have like all this extra space in it, and like that would be so great. And I wouldn't, even if I was stupid, ended up feeling like I had all this empty space and I bought more shit, that shit would also go into the storage facility, right? So it's like it would free up space in the apartment and it would be nice, assuming you can afford the cost of it. But I imagine the difficulty of moving, it's like you're digging stuff out of the closet and putting stuff back in the closet. Moving stuff from your apartment to another location back and forth.
Yeah.
Even just twice a year. Just the hassle of that, just losing 2 days every year, basically, of having to, put stuff in and take stuff out, assuming I only do it two times.
Yeah.
It's like, if there's something that I can afford to just not have for half the year and have it be in another place entirely, I can afford to throw that thing out.
Yep.
Just in the garbage, right? So that's why I do not, and I probably won't have some sort of storage place. Unless they open up like a mini store, like literally next door or across the street or something like that.
Yep. The problem is those tend to be way too expensive.
Yeah, but if that happened, it might be considered, but because the cost of going to it would be significantly lowered. But that has not happened, so no.
Yep. The other thing I was thinking about is that gaming season episode. We will suddenly get into a certain kind of game and play that kind of game a lot for a long period of time. And then that'll ebb and flow and a different game will come in. We'll have seasons of we're playing a lot of tabletop, playing a lot of RPGs, playing a lot of online games for some reason. COVID time made a special season of a lot of async games.
Yep. Yeah, it's like, it's like when there's some people who have only one or a few, really focused interests that they're big into that thing and not into other things.
Then their seasons become like it's Magic Tournament season. It's not Magic Tournament season.
Sure. But it's like that's the thing that they do, right? Or the handful of things that they do. It's people like us, there's so many things that I do, and they're constantly waxing and waning relative to each other, right? I haven't really done a lot of baking recently. I haven't, maybe 6 months since I baked, maybe something like that. Photography I haven't done in a year plus, right? Because I'm not really, I see other people who are taking photos in their house or going out anyway, and neither of those interest me. So,
yep.
But I'll probably explode on that front as soon as I can safely go outside, right?
Yep.
And just all the different hobbies. It's someone will you'll have Gundams, and it's you'll go and you'll build 5 Gundams, and then you won't build another one for months. It's just seasonal interest changes. Right now, I'm watching a lot of anime. Suddenly, I haven't watched it before. Before a few weeks ago, I wasn't watching any anime for months. Right?
Yeah, and lately there's been a lot of part of it. Sometimes it's because there'll be more media of a certain type. Sometimes it's just that clock rings and it's time. But same, I'm watching a lot of anime lately too, and it's not some of the shows I'm watching are a couple of years old. It's not particularly good season of anime. It was you know what? I like anime. I haven't watched a lot of anime recently. What anime is out there that's good? And suddenly watching a ton of anime.
Mm-hmm.
As an aside,
you watch one and you're like, right, I remember.
Yep. Well, it's fact because I remember there was an era at RIT where I stopped even when I became president of the anime club, when I had a lot more responsibilities on the e-board. I watched a lot less anime for a year and a half, the lead up to that. And there was an era where I didn't like any of the shows that were coming out. I'd watch them out of obligation because I had to be able to speak to them and know about them and stuff. But I didn't really I'd watch an episode of Scried, didn't really give a fuck about the next episode, but I'd watch it just because. Yeah. But then I'll watch it recently, I watched an episode of The Great Pretender, and that the anime gland in my body suddenly perked up and said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! You should watch the second episode of that right now. Don't wait."
If you watch. Right, but
don't miss it.
If you keep doing that and watching tons and tons of anime, eventually it'll just be all right, I had enough of that.
Yep.
And you'll not consciously, but just naturally, you'll move on to a different thing. We'll be all right, I remember that thing, and you'll start doing that other thing that you forgot about, and then it will just naturally take away the anime watching time from.
Yep. It's almost like you have a stacked rank priority list of things, but they'll cluster together. But one seasonality that changed a lot for us is convention season. Because it used to be
Conventions used to be
summer.
a summer thing. Yeah. All the conventions, San Diego Comic-Con, Otakon, these conventions were intentionally scheduling themselves in the summer, historically speaking, and their logic was sound, which was we will hold our convention in the summer when a lot of people are, especially students, are not working and have no obligations, and the weather is good. And people will come on vacation to our place. We can get, for example, summer camps could take field trips to our convention, things of that nature. And that will just be really great for our business. If we hold our convention at another time of the year, less people will come. We risk shitty weather, right? And we'll make less money. So conventions were all in the summer. And then other conventions were like, you know what? We can't be competing with these big boys in the summer. Let's have our convention in not the summer, right? Because we'll just lose to the big conventions.
You get like the MagFest over near New Year's.
Right. And so it's like now, and those conventions were somehow pulling it off, right? Enough people were going regardless of the time of year, and they were making it work. So that trend of all conventions in summer sort of ended, and they're just conventions all times of year, and your convention season ends up then being determined by which conventions you choose to go to and not go to.
Like as we backed away from anime conventions and like basically everything but PAX and MagFest.
Yeah.
Because of how PAX's and video game type stuff is clustered and board game type stuff, our convention season went from summer to all year to September through March.
Yeah, it's pretty much like it was almost like school season, right? It's like you'd kick off PAX in Labor Day, like school starting. Then there'd be more PAXs. PAX Oss we only went to barely, but PAX Unplugged is now November times. And then you got South January, MagFest January.
Yep. PAX East would kind of like end it.
Yeah, East is usually in the spring. And then it's like, okay, summer, spring, summer break, no conventions till PAX West again. And like they'd all be clustered into that, school time of, fall through early spring. And then summer, nothing.
And it made me notice something because whenever there's a seasonality like that in my life that persists over enough years, other things start to get like attached to it. Like it accumulates traditions and it accumulates expectations. Like I would start to think of PAX West as the end of summer, like specifically. Like flying to Seattle is the ritual that marks the end of summer. The pre-PAX like board gaming and dinner was like this moment that would loom large in my vision, like toward late summer. Like I'd be thinking, well, summer's ending, that sucks, and I'd imagine sitting in the pre-PAX gaming, like hanging out, playing a Quartermaster General before PAX starts.
Right, but it's like I'd get there and I'd be like, well, I guess I'm not going to the beach anymore this year.
Yep.
I guess that's, biking's probably not too much more this year. It's PAX time, hooray, but this other stuff is over, I guess, until next time.
Yep. So I think that killed enough time. We actually did kind of a long episode, so I'll just stop right there because I'm hungry, thanks to you talking about dim sum, and hockey started.
Oh, let me see. Hopefully we're not losing by 100.
I assume it started at 7 today.
Take a look.
Because that other game was weirdly at 6.